Caitlin Clark is back. But this is not the comeback Fever fans were waiting for. Because yes, she is expected to play against the Las Vegas Aces. But no, Indiana is not letting her loose yet. The reported plan is simple. Keep her on a minutes restriction, somewhere around 20 to 25 minutes, while she continues working back from a back injury. And that one detail changes everything. Because this is not just about whether Caitlin Clark can step on the floor. She already did that. The real question is whether she can look like Caitlin Clark again. Can she find rhythm? Can she play freely? Can she handle contact? Can she run the offense without constantly thinking about her body? And maybe most importantly, can the Fever win while still protecting the player their entire future is built around? That is the real story tonight. Not just Caitlin Clark returns. The real story is this. Caitlin Clark is back, but Indiana is still treating her like a player they cannot afford to risk. And honestly, they are probably right. When a star returns from injury, fans usually want one thing. They want the old version immediately. They want the logo threes. They want the impossible passes. They want the pace. They want the emotion. They want the player who makes every possession feel like something could happen. But injury returns do not work like that, especially when the injury involves the back. A back issue is not like a small bruise where a player can simply ignore it once the adrenaline starts. The back affects everything: shooting rhythm, defensive movement, acceleration, balance, conditioning, even how comfortable a player feels sitting on the bench and getting warm again. That is why the minutes restriction matters. A player can be available and still not be fully back. A player can be cleared and still not be comfortable. A player can play and still be managed. That is exactly where Caitlin Clark appears to be right now. She is available enough to help, but not free enough to be unleashed. And that is the tension Indiana has to manage. Because the Fever need her, but they cannot treat her like a machine. Her return against the Los Angeles Sparks showed exactly why this is complicated. Caitlin played only 16 minutes. She finished with 9 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. On paper, that is not a disaster. But it also was not a normal Caitlin Clark game. The biggest problem was rhythm. She had 4 turnovers. She could not fully settle into the game. And after the game, she was honest about how difficult it is to play in short bursts, sit down, cool off, and then try to jump back in again. That is not an excuse. That is the reality of a minutes restriction. Basketball rhythm is not just about being on the floor. It is about staying connected to the game, feeling the pace, reading the defense, knowing when to push, knowing when to slow down, knowing when your legs are under you. For a shooter and passer like Caitlin, rhythm is everything. If she is only getting short windows, she has to create impact quickly. But if she forces it, the turnovers come. If she plays too carefully, the Fever offense loses the thing that makes her special. That is the trap. Indiana wants her active, but they also need her protected. And those two goals do not always work together cleanly. Some fans will see the minutes restriction and get frustrated. They will say, if she is healthy enough to play, let her play. But that is not how smart teams manage franchise players. The Fever are not just managing one game. They are managing a season. They are managing all-star pressure. They are managing ticket attention. They are managing national attention. They are managing the future of the most important player in their organization. Caitlin Clark is not a normal rotation guard. She is the engine of Indiana's offense. She is the face of the franchise. And whether people like it or not, she is one of the biggest business drivers in the WNBA. That means Indiana cannot afford to be emotional. Fans can be emotional. The team cannot. The medical staff cannot. The coaching staff cannot. Stephanie White has to think beyond tonight. Because the worst-case scenario is not Caitlin playing 20 minutes and looking rusty. The worst-case scenario is Caitlin being pushed too fast, taking another hit, tightening up, and turning a manageable return into a bigger problem. That is why the restriction matters. It is not a punishment. It is protection, not from competition, from impatience. But even with limited minutes, tonight still matters. Because every Caitlin Clark return becomes a test. The Aces are not just another opponent. Even without A'ja Wilson recently dealing with an ankle issue, Las Vegas still represents a measuring stick type of matchup. They are experienced. They are physical. They know how to pressure guards. They know how to disrupt rhythm. And that makes this a dangerous kind of game for Caitlin's comeback. Not dangerous because something bad must happen. Dangerous because this is exactly the kind of game where a rusty star can get sped up. The Fever have to decide when to use her. Do they start her? Do they limit her bursts? Do they save minutes for late-game situations? Do they let her run the offense? Or do they keep the ball moving through other players to reduce pressure? Those choices will tell us a lot. Because Indiana is no longer just asking, can Caitlin play? They are asking, how do we use Caitlin without asking too much too soon? That is a much more serious question. The biggest thing to watch is rhythm, not points. Not one highlight. Not one deep three. Rhythm. Does Caitlin look comfortable bringing the ball up? Does she change speeds normally? Does she look confident planting and turning? Does she pass with timing? Does she move without hesitation? Does she look frustrated when she goes to the bench? Because with a minute's restriction, the box score can lie. A player might score 9 points and still look better than the number. Or she might hit one big three and still look physically limited. That is why tonight cannot be judged only by the stat line. The real question is whether she looks freer than she did in the Sparks game. If she does, that is a win. Even if the numbers are not huge, if she looks hesitant, uncomfortable, or out of sync, then Indiana still has work to do. And honestly, that would be understandable. Coming back from injury is not a switch. It is a process. This is also where Indiana's supporting cast becomes important. Because if Caitlin is limited, everyone else has to carry more responsibility. Aaliyah Boston has to stabilize the game. Kelsey Mitchell has to create offense. Sophie Cunningham has to bring edge and spacing. The Fever bench has to avoid dead minutes. And the coaching staff has to make sure Caitlin is not forced into hero ball just because fans are waiting for a moment. That is the biggest danger. When a player like Caitlin returns, the crowd wants magic immediately. Teammates can start waiting for her to create everything. Defenses can load up on her because they know the emotional weight of the night. And suddenly, a player on a minute's restriction is still carrying superstar pressure. Indiana cannot allow that. If Caitlin is limited, the Fever have to play like a team. That means less standing, more movement, better screens, cleaner spacing, and smarter possessions when she is on the bench. Because if the Fever fall apart every time Caitlin sits, the restriction becomes even harder to manage. This is the part fans may not want to hear. A limited Caitlin Clark is still better than no Caitlin Clark. But a rushed Caitlin Clark is dangerous for everyone. The Fever need her for more than one game. The WNBA needs her for more than one headline. And fans need to understand that a careful return is not the same as weakness. It is strategy. The goal is not to win the internet tonight. The goal is to get Caitlin back to a place where she can play freely again. Where she can push pace, where she can shoot without hesitation, where she can take contact and keep moving, where she can stop thinking about how many minutes she has left and start thinking only about how to control the game. That version may not fully arrive tonight, but tonight can be the step toward it. And that is why this game matters. Not because Caitlin has to be perfect, but because we need to see progress. So yes, Caitlin Clark is back. But this is not a full comeback yet. This is the careful version, the managed version, the version where every minute matters, every substitution matters, every contact moment matters, every expression on the bench matters, and every decision by the Fever tells us how worried they still are. Fans want Caitlin unleashed. That is natural. But Indiana has to be smarter than the emotion of the moment. Because if they get this right, tonight is not just about a return. It is about rebuilding rhythm, rebuilding confidence, and making sure the most important player in the franchise is actually ready for the next stretch. Caitlin Clark is back. But the real question is not whether she plays tonight. The real question is whether the Fever are willing to wait long enough for the real Caitlin Clark to return. And that answer may define much more than one game.